During the crisis in Venezuela, governments of the United States, the European Union, Canada, Mexico, Panama and Switzerland applied individual sanctions against people associated with the administration of Nicolas Maduro. The sanctions were in response to repression during the 2014 Venezuelan protests and the 2017 Venezuelan protests, and activities during the 2017 Venezuelan Constituent Assembly election and the 2018 Venezuelan presidential election. Sanctions were placed on current and former government officials, including members of the Supreme Tribunal of Justice and the 2017 Constituent National Assembly, members of the military and security forces, and private individuals accused of being involved in human rights abuses, corruption, degradation in the rule of law and repression of democracy. As of March 2018, the Washington Office on Latin America said 78 Venezuelans associated with Maduro had been sanctioned by several countries. Through April 2019, the U.S. has sanctioned more than 150 companies, vessels and individuals, in addition to revoking visas of 718 individuals associated with Maduro. The sanctions included freezing of individuals' accounts and assets, prohibiting of transactions with sanctioned parties, seizing of assets, arms embargoes and travel bans. David Smolansky in Public Radio International said the sanctions targeted Maduro and Chavismo elites, while having little impact on average Venezuelans. The Washington Post stated that the deprivation long predates recently imposed U.S. sanctions. Beginning in January 2019, during the Venezuelan presidential crisis, the United States applied additional economic sanctions in the petroleum, gold, mining, food and banking industries. A report published by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights stated that although the pervasive and devastating economic and social crisis began before the imposition of the first economic sanctions, the new sanctions could worsen the situation. In April 2019, Human Rights Watch and Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health published a joint report, noting that most early sanctions did not target the Venezuelan economy in any way, adding that sanctions imposed in 2019 could worsen the situation, but that the crisis precedes them. Through April 2019, the U.S. has sanctioned more than 150 companies, vessels and individuals, in addition to revoking visas of 718 individuals associated with Maduro. The United States has been concerned about Venezuelan narcotics trafficking since 2005 and its lack of cooperation in combating terrorism since 2006. The U.S. has used sanctions as a policy tool for at least a decade to combat terrorism-related activity as well as narcotics and human trafficking, corruption and human rights violations. According to the Congressional Research Service's Venezuela Overview of U.S. Sanctions, in 2008, Executive Order 13224 aimed to reduce terrorist funding in Venezuela via sanctions, and the United States Department of the Treasury has used the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act to sanction at least 22 Venezuelans, including several current and former government officials, prior to the crisis in Venezuela. In 2008, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, Henry Rangel Silva, Director National Directorate of Intelligence and Prevention Services, and Ramon Rodriguez Chassin, former Minister of the Interior, were sanctioned. Carvajal was arrested in Spain on 12 April 2019 based on arrest warrant from the United States for the 2011 charges. The U.S. asked Spain to extradite Carvajal. In 2011, 4 allies of Hugo Chavez, including a general, 2 politicians, and an intelligence official, were sanctioned for allegedly helping FARC obtain weapons and smuggle drugs. Then Foreign Minister Maduro said the accusations were abusive. Freddy Bernal, one of the sanctioned, dismissed the charges as an aggression, saying he would not be frightened by the sanctions. President Barack Obama signed the Venezuela Defense of Human Rights and Civil Society Act of 2014, a U.S. act imposing sanctions on Venezuelan individuals held responsible by the United States for human rights violations during the 2014 Venezuelan protests. In December of that year, it requires the president to impose sanctions on those responsible for significant acts of violence or serious human rights abuses associated with February 2014 protests or, more broadly, against anyone who has directed or ordered the arrest or prosecution of a person primarily because of the person's legitimate exercise of freedom of expression or assembly. The act was extended in 2016 to expire on 31 December 2019. On 2 February 2015, the United States Department of State imposed visa restrictions on current and former Venezuelan officials that were allegedly linked to presumed human rights abuses and political corruption. The visa restrictions also included family members, with the Department of State saying, "We are sending a